Hey y'all, welcome to Book Marketing Mania. I'm Kim, a book marketing strategist for Christian authors, and I'm so thrilled you're here to learn how to grow your author platform, market your book on podcast, and steward your message in a way that honors God and your time. So, the last few weeks, we've been in full audit mode to look back and determine what marketing strategies have worked best for you in the past and how you've been using your time to market your books. And if perhaps you've discovered that social media is not working best for you to market your books, or it takes more time than you have, then you'll love today's episode. I invited my new friend Sandy Cooper to be my guest. Sandy is the author of several books and Bible studies. She hosts the Balanced Momcast, and she's co-host of the brand new Writing Off Social podcast. I started seeing Sandy's name pop up over and over as a guest on podcasts that I listen to, and when that happens, I pay attention. And I knew she'd be great to come and inspire you if you're scratching your head wondering, how in the world would I ever market my book if I'm not on social media? Now, I do want to say this isn't a get off social episode. That's between you and God. I personally love social for the connections I make and the relationships I build, neither of which have to do with me churning out content, chasing an algorithm, or spending all my time consuming content on social. And so I love that there are lots of ways to market content these days, and Sandy's here to share several ideas to do just that, and 4 questions you can ask yourself to evaluate which of these would work best for you and your marketing goals if you want to reach new readers off of social. So whether you're just starting to build your author platform or you're already marketing your book, you are in for a treat today. So let's get to it. Okay. Hey, Sandy, welcome to Book Marketing Mania. I'm so glad you're here today to serve our listeners.
Thank you for having me, Kim. I'm really excited to be here.
So I wanted to invite Sandy on because I've talked to so many of you that are really struggling with how can I market my books in less time, or how can I market my books without it taking all my time? And I know social media plays a big piece of that. So Sandy, I just want you to kind of give our listeners a little bit of scoop on this new venture. I know you've authored several books and Bible studies and have taken a break from social at different times. And you've kind of launched into this new venture of helping writers market off social. So can you kind of give us a little bit of the history of how that came about?
I'll start way at the beginning. I joined social media in 2008. At the exact same time I joined, I started my blog. And so I could really easily just post the link to my Facebook and share it with my, couple of in real life friends who happen to also be my Facebook friends, and they liked it, and then they would share it. And, it just was super easy. And then, it wasn't long before people started noticing that writers who were growing their online following on social media platforms were starting to get the attention of book publishers and agents. And because I was actively seeking publication at the time, I went all in. I went to conferences and they gave me numbers to shoot for. And if you grow to around 5,000, then call us back. So I went all in. I got everything. By 2016, I'm like all in. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and I'm just spending all this time there trying to grow my online platform. It just consumed a tremendous amount of my day. And, it was probably 4 to 6 hours a day that I was spending at that time. And it just drained the life out of me. And so I started taking just regular breaks like people do. And it just continued to wear on me. It was not serving me anymore. Social media was not giving me a good return on my investment at all. It was sucking the life out of me. I just felt like it was a moving target that I couldn't catch. They kept changing the rules. And so a couple things happened in succession in 2019 that really made me take a new look at how I was approaching my marketing and growing my platform, because I still really wanted to be a writer. By this time, I already had one book out, and I was trying to pitch my second one to publishers. My first one I self-published. And so I was going to try the traditional publishing route again. And so I went to a writers conference and I sat across from these agents and publishers, and the numbers that they were now giving me were 50 to 100,000. And I was like, what? Like, I can't do that. I thought I was so defeated. I thought, I can't. This is not the writing life I had envisioned. This is not how I want to spend my time. And so I came home from that conference, and I had already been making it a matter of prayer, but I really did this time. And I was like, God, like, please just tell me what to do. And so I had been listening to, I know he's been a guest on your show, and I think this is where you heard me too, was Thomas Umstadt's podcast, Novel Marketing. Was listening to his podcast, and he had an episode that talked about what is the best social media platform for writers, and he kind of went through all the different platforms, kind of talking about the pros and cons of each one and like what strengths they play to and that kind of thing. And at the end of that episode, he made a statement and he said, but if you're a writer who is seeking publication, the best use of your time is to get off social media and go write your book.
Yeah.
And I was like, Kim, it felt like an answer to prayer. Like I said that to Thomas when I talked to him in person. I finally got a chance to share that with him. And he's like, I need to be more careful about what I say on my podcast. I was like, you do. I said, because people think you sound like the voice of God. So, but it was true. It really was an answer to prayer. And literally that very moment, I walked over to my computer and I wrote an exit post and I said, I'm taking a year off to write my book. And so I did. And I came back a year later. I was only there for like a couple weeks before I realized like I really hate it here. And so I asked God, I'm like, can we just find another way? Like, because I don't want to do this anymore. And it wasn't like a big thundering audible voice or anything, but I really felt the Lord just give me the peace to lay that down and find another way. Like, I just thought, yes, we can do this, Sandy. Like, I just realized how big God was and that he wasn't confined to, despite what the entire writing industry was telling us at the time, God's not confined to that. And we can do something else. And so, and I also realized that I really needed to, like, if high social media numbers equaled success in the writing industry, then I needed to redefine what success was for me.
Right.
And so yeah, on March 21st, 2021, I got off. I completely got off. And I manually unfriended all of my Facebook friends. I deactivated Instagram at the time, and now it's just a small private account that I almost never use. And so I decided when I took that next break, I redirected it toward things that I really wanted to move the needle in my writing career, namely write more books. And so I wrote my third book, and I was on a podcast tour, and I was marketing that book. And I know you talk a lot about podcast touring, and it's a great way to market books.
Yeah.
So I start talking to moms because I serve moms. Like that's my audience. And so I start talking to moms about it. And what I found, Kim, was that when I'm on these podcasts, so I created this 7-day challenge for moms, and I recorded all these podcast episodes about leaving social media, and I invited all these experts onto my show about it, and it was great. It was such a great experience to go through that. But what I found was, again, when I went on another podcast tour to pitch the 7-day mom challenge, sitting down and talking to the podcasters or the creators about how to do this thing without social media lit a fire in me that talking to moms about leaving social media doesn't. I realized, like, whoa, I want moms to get off social media. I think it's smart, but I understand why moms feel like they need to be there, because if they've got kids on there, or if that's the only way they can keep in touch with their school or whatever, you know what I mean? That's right. It's important that you got to do what you got to do. But when I started talking to like writers and marketers and other podcasters and creators and online entrepreneurs, I just got so excited about it. So my friend Mary Kay and I decided we were going to start a podcast, and it's called Writing Off Social. And we have a website and a whole lot of things we're ready to roll out.
Appreciate that, because I think it's just important to hear kind of the history directly, from your mouth and your heart. And I do want everyone to go check out your new podcast, because it's it's so good with you and Mary Kay, just being so open and honest and vulnerable about your challenges with social media and just your heart for helping
Yeah.
writers. I love being on social for the aspect of building relationships, like the
Sure.
behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see, but
Mhm.
that, trying to figure out what to post and chasing the algorithm. It's just so time consuming. I mean, some
It
people
is.
are really good at it and some
Sure.
people just aren't, and so it does take up so much of our time. But I know there's like some people, it's that question, like, how am I ever going to market my books if I'm not on social? Because we are so used to that being the first thing you think of. You have to be
Of
on social media.
course, yes, and that's what everyone would tell you. Yeah,
Yeah.
when
And I
you're
think
out
we
in the
really
industry.
have to look at how we're using our time there, because I think when you realize how much time you might be taking trying to keep up with the algorithm and figure out all the content to post, and then you see the results that may not be what you're looking for, you
Yeah.
could even, and I'm sure you've probably, I think you've talked about this in one of your interviews, like you can cut back that time,
Sure.
and just really evaluate. But I think there's like, in my mind, there's kind of the two camps of one is like, okay, I'm going to stick around, but I need to figure out how to use social differently. Right. And,
Right.
and what are some other things I can do? Like if I'm just drawing a blank, what are some other things I could do to market my book? And we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that in a minute. But I think there's also this other camp. And I so appreciated the conversation. I mean, I've loved the conversation with you and Thomas, because that's the very first time I think I got
Mhm.
to really listen to the aspect of it from a writer perspective. Like you said, it wasn't just, it was not just a mom show, although I kept seeing your name pop up in all the mom shows. So I can't wait to talk more about,
Yay.
podcast guesting too, because I'm just always fascinated by that. And when
Yeah.
someone's name keeps popping up on your favorite podcast, it's definitely time to pay attention.
Yes.
But I love the conversation that you and Stephanie Gass also had on her show, The
Mhm.
Online Business for Christian Women. And I know she was a guest on your show as well. But I
Yes.
so appreciated y'all just sharing again from your hearts of just the, we hate to call it an addiction, but it can be, if you're just
Sure.
constantly picking up your phone and looking at social and, spending all your time there. And I had a episode a while back about that, just like, I think we think we're marketing our books, right? But we
Mhm.
might have got on with that intention, but then, all this time goes by and you're like, well, I just wasted all this time. And you think in your mind, you wasted all that time marketing your book, and it really had nothing to do with that, right? It was just all the,
That's right.
the FOMO and the comparison and the just getting, hooked up on that scroll. But anyway, what I was trying to get around to, though, is just thinking about, kind of diving into, Sandy, just, and I'm sure you've heard from lots and lots of people, like you have been talking to lots of podcasters and writers. And I'm
Mhm.
sure, like, when you talk about writing off social, like you talked about, the publishers look for those numbers. And
Yeah.
I think the title change, as they start being more aware of it. But I do
I
think it's
think so too.
probably a way, like an only way they could even try to measure if you do have an audience to sell books to. So I definitely want to start diving into just, a couple of other ways that writers could be doing, other things that they could be participating in to reach new readers. And then,
Mhm.
maybe if you have any tips on how they can kind of measure it as well. I mean, some things are
Yeah.
really easy to measure, some things aren't. So that they could feel like if they're presenting a proposal to a publisher or even a hybrid publisher that may not have quite the same numbers, but everybody, wants numbers, right? Unless you're
Yes.
just paying it all out of pocket to take care of. But anyway, let's dive in, because I know I had come up with a couple of these because Sandy has a really great PDF that she'll share at the end that you guys can take advantage of to learn some different ways that you can market off social. And so I picked a couple of these just to see if Sandy would kind of walk us through them.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, before we go into those ways, Sandy, let me just ask you. So when you start talking to writers about this, some of them are so fascinated, they want to figure it out right away. And some of them, I'm imagine, give you a little pushback, like they don't know how in the world would I connect with readers if I don't do it on
Yes.
social? Do you ever hear that? And what is your answer to that?
Yes, I hear that. That is the question. Well, then what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the two big questions that I hear is how will I find my reader and how will I be attractive to a publisher?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to answer the publisher question
Uh-huh.
first, because now I will admit I am not traditionally published. So
Right.
I decided that I am not going to try to do that anymore. But I have talked to enough publishers to know that if you have a robust email list and if you have a some kind of either a thriving podcast or a, a full speaking calendar
Mm-hmm.
where you are reaching, you know, 500 people a month in
Mm-hmm.
person, with a combination of those three things, a publisher will absolutely look at you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have not committed career suicide by saying I'm not doing the social media thing anymore. Because, and I know that Thomas has talked about this on your show,
Mm-hmm.
but he and I discussed it too when I was on his show. But the conversion rate for social media to book buyer is like 0.1%. So for every 1,000 people who follow you on social media, one person buys your book. But when you talk about an email list or a podcast or in-person events, that conversion rate can be, 30, 40, 50%. And so if you can show those kinds of numbers, now every publishing house is going to be different because small publishing houses have a different standard. If you want one of those big giant publishing houses, you probably need to go play the social media game until they decide that's not the metric anymore.
Right.
So I don't really know what to tell you for that unless you're speaking at arenas. If you are an arena speaker, you probably wouldn't have a problem. Or if you have like an Apple top ranked podcast, you probably wouldn't have a problem. Or, something of that magnitude. If you have 10 to 20,000 on your email list or more, you probably would not have a problem getting a bigger contract. But so that answers the first question as far as like publishing question is are you committing career suicide by doing this? The answer is no. You just need to refocus into strategies and pathways that you can show a publisher that you have people who follow you and who will buy your book. That's what they want to know.
Yes.
That's what they want to know. Okay. And then the other thing is, how will I reach my reader? Well, my answer is always, your reader is not just on social media. Your reader is living a whole other life. Unless she's addicted to her social media feed, which a lot of people are. So, we probably shouldn't assume she's not. But even if she is on social media, she is Googling her problems. She goes to church, she her kids' places. She's on Amazon. She's at the bookstore, at the library. She goes to, she's in clubs. There's so many places that your reader exists outside of social media. And so the key, and again, it's like a shifting of a mindset. Instead of just going for the low hanging fruit, like I'll just throw something up on social media, I'm trying to help people be like, okay, no, really, let's find where she is and let's go talk to her there. Like, let's find her there and talk about your message and your book and your offerings. Because she's barely seeing it on social media anyway. She's seeing it for like a quarter of a second, if she even sees it at all.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I know the numbers are so deceiving. I mean, just, you can see a big number and it doesn't mean engagement at all. And I know like even me, like I go through my, everybody laughs, but I go through my followers and delete people because it's like, there's some men that they do not need to be following, but it's just silly. The random strangers that start following you because you went to some hashtag. I don't know. It's just so crazy. Yeah. The numbers, you just never really know. Plus, I was talking to somebody the other day about, I don't think people realize too, just how you can mute people, like even though I'm following you, I might not want to see your stuff and I mute you. And so that's confusing.
You may be muted too.
You're blaming it on the algorithm, but really it's because that person didn't want to follow you. So anyway, it is just all a game and it's hard to know the rules of the game, but some of us want to play it and some of us don't. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can then market off of social.
As we talk about all these, I really want to like step back a little bit and it's helpful when people are trying to decide what to do instead of social media to really understand what were they trying to accomplish on social media. Because a lot of writers, they're just throwing their content out there because they're told that they should, just post this and do it in a video and do it in a story and do it in however we're telling you to do it on this platform or this platform. And they don't even really know what they're trying to accomplish. And so I try to break it down for them into 4 different things. So are you trying to grow? Like, are you trying to build your following? So that's one thing. Are you trying to nurture, which is like building credibility with your existing following? So, you're trying to show up as like an authority as someone that they trust and that you can then take them to the next level and eventually sell them something, or not. If you choose to not ever sell, that's fine too. But and then the third would be building community, which is building a network of people who follow you, but then can communicate with each other, which is something social media used to be really good at and kind of has fallen off that.
Right.
Or are you trying to sell? So, those are 4 different things. And I don't think people ever, I think some people know why they're there, but some people haven't really thought through, oh yeah, like those are all 4 distinct things. And so in the freebie that you mentioned, those 27 ways to grow and nurture your audience outside of social media, they all kind of tackle a different, some of them do more than one, but some of them tackle one specific one. It's an art to then gather the ones in something in each category so that you have your bases covered.
And I noticed on your website, you have several of these. So they've obviously been very successful for you, Sandy, is your quizzes. And I am always fascinated by quizzes. So talk about how you got started with some of your quizzes and which ones have been the most successful for you.
Yes, I have 3 quizzes and I love my quizzes. It's like one of the best ways that I have grown my email list for sure.
Yeah.
And so this one checks a lot of boxes. So first of all, for growth, yes, you can collect email addresses to show people their results. So when I first started doing quizzes, I was like, oh, I don't want to ask them to put in their email address. But then I realized when I didn't do that, what's the point? Like,
yeah.
They got to take the fun quiz, but I wasn't even thinking. That was years ago when I started. It was like 2017 or 18 when I did my first quiz. Nurturing, you can totally use a quiz also for nurturing. The results that when they receive their results, you can funnel them based on their results into landing pages that are specific to them. Or once they're in your email list, you can funnel them into like a nurture sequence at that point, which is great. Community, it does not help with community. So that would not be a strategy you would use for that. But sales, absolutely. 2 of my quizzes point directly to a book eventually. And the third one points directly to my 7-day challenge. Okay. And so, and so it is a really easy way to do that. The pros of using quizzes, I would say, is that people love to take quizzes. Like it's just a fun, easy thing that people are like, oh, I'll take that quiz to find out what my superpower is. Like they like to do that stuff. And so when you go on a podcast tour or, you're sharing with other people, it's an easy freebie. You can be like, okay, and I have a quiz to find out, what is your busyness personality, or if you need to take a break from social media. Like those are my 3 quizzes. And so, and then you can easily share it to your email list. Now it's obviously not going to grow your email list if you're sharing it to your existing email list. But if you're trying to get them eventually to, funnel them into something that you want them to purchase, or you want to give them something easy to share on your behalf, a quiz is excellent, because not all of, even if you make the decision that like, I'm done with social media, most of your readers probably are still on social media. And so you can ask them, will you share this on social media? And quizzes share pretty easily on social media. They used to share a lot more easily. But now, the algorithm makes it so they make it hard for you to take them off of the website. But it's better than no sharing. So
yeah, that's a great idea to ask people to share. And you're right. I'm a sucker for quizzes. A good quiz. Too. Sometimes I think they can be so difficult, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to take this quiz.
I don't know,
but I do. I love that. Yeah, your most recent one. Is it time for you to break up with social? Like that's so perfect for what we're talking about on the episode today. And then you can lead listeners over to that quiz. And like you say, it's just so easy to take a quiz and you get those results. But definitely listen to like what Sandy's talking about is you're wanting to put them into a funnel to go somewhere, because I know a lot of people will use it to build their list, but it's like they're just getting the emails and then nothing really happens afterwards. So you definitely want to have some strategy behind that. But yeah, I love quizzes. But like I said, I noticed you had several, so I knew obviously that was probably working for you to build your email list. Yes. And then another thing on your list, of course, one of my favorite things, podcasting. So I would love to hear, because I know you have your Balanced Momcast and now you've started a second podcast. So talk to us a little bit about what you have seen happen with hosting a podcast? Because I know a lot of our listeners, are considering doing that. And I think, as well as I know you do too, it's a great way to build your platform and market your book. But I know a lot of our listeners too, they're busy moms, like ourselves.
Absolutely.
Maybe they have littles, maybe they're caregivers for their parents, and they're just thinking, oh gosh, I cannot put one more thing on my plate. So,
exactly.
So I know you've been down that road, all those roads. So talk to us about how podcasting has helped with your business, Sandy.
Yeah. So I made a very distinct decision in March of 2019. I've been podcasting for 4 years now. I made and it had to be this kind of decision that I was going to take the energy that I was putting into generating new blogging content, and I was going to shift and try podcasting content. And so rather than adding a new thing to my plate, I took something off my plate and redirected that energy. So I would say that would be the first thing, especially for busy moms. I was a busy mom at the time. I've got 3 kids. And at that point my oldest one had just left for college, but I still had 2 other ones that needed me all the time, at home running all the carpool. And so I get that. I would advise, podcasting is a huge commitment, and it requires time, and it requires, you can't just, I know a lot of people have a more casual approach to podcasting where they'll hop on and not really care so much about the audio and that type of thing. And if there's like sound, like distraction in the background and that type of thing, or they won't edit really well. And that's okay. But I think the podcasts that do well tend to be the ones that sound good and don't waste people's time.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And so, it takes time to create that kind of content, and then to record it, and then to edit it, or you need money to hire someone to edit it. When I started out, it was like a solid 12 hours a week for a 30-minute episode. It would take me, and that's no lie. It was, and that wasn't me wasting time. I'm a super efficient person, but it was a lot of time. And it still takes me a lot of time to do my podcast. And so I would just say I know that a lot of writers are hearing over and over again, you need to start a podcast. And I'm a big fan of that, but I also understand it might not work for you, and that might not be the best thing for you. If you can't commit that kind of time and effort into making it a good podcast. So I just want to preface it with that. But So going down those boxes, as far as does it check the growth box? 100%. As soon, once your podcast starts to grow, these people are so committed, because they're hearing your voice. And, I'm a reader, I'm a writer. And so I love the written word, but it does take your content to a different level when someone can hear your tone and just hear your heart. I just feel like they can hear it in a way, when you're talking about it, that really enhances your writing. And so, there's having a podcast. Oh my goodness. It has made me realize that why I don't need social media. I mean, it has completely replaced that because I have this solid following, and it just continues to grow, because the longer your podcast is in existence, people just keep finding it, and they just keep finding it, and they just keep finding it. And they're going back and listening to episodes from 4 years ago and still emailing me. And and if you do it right, and you have a freebie at the end, or you point people to your book at the end, or, to your course or whatever, then 3 years later, they're still downloading that freebie, and they're still downloading, they're still going and buying your book, and you haven't said anything about your book for 2 years.
Yes.
I mean, hopefully you're saying it more than that, but you know what I mean? So, so growth, 100%. And there's so many ways, you can capture the email addresses at the same time, because all those ways I just said, by just pointing people to your quiz, or pointing people to your download, or you give people 10 steps, and then you say, don't worry about writing this down. I'll have a printable at the end, and you can just download it, so there are so many ways to do that. Nurturing, 100%. Checks the nurturing box, because for all the reasons we just said. People hear your voice, they hear your heart, they feel like they know you. People email me all the time, I feel like we're friends. And I'm thinking, I have no idea who you are, but but because they hear my voice, they feel like we're friends.
Yeah.
Community, again, you can kind of build a community, but you almost have to take your podcasting community to a platform to do that. So right now I'm starting to experiment with Patreon, and for my highest end supporters, I have a monthly call with them, and we hop on Zoom, and I have a subject, like something that we can talk about, and they're getting to know each other. Like that's the point of that.
Yeah. I love that in a community.
Yes. And so that it checks that box. And then sales, oh my goodness. Like it's the best way to sell your stuff, I think. I mean, it just, again, like for all the reasons I said, because podcasts have such a long shelf life that people are finding it for years, and they're still going and clicking on your thing. And so,
yeah, it's not something that goes away in 5 minutes or 24 hours. Whatever.
No, I mean, it's
sure.
like years.
Yeah.
And so, yes, podcasting checks a solid 3 of those boxes. And depending on if you can, do something like Patreon or, something like that, then it could also check the community box for sure.
Yeah. I love that so much. Okay, so next, Sandy, let's talk about collaborating with other writers, especially for if they're podcasters on a podcast tour, because that obviously is my favorite thing to talk about on this show. And again, I heard Sandy on, Thomas's novel marketing. I heard you on Stephanie Gass's online business for Christian women. And like I said, I just kept seeing you pop up on other mom shows that I listened to, and it really captured my attention. So that alone, shows you start noticing guest names. But tell us a little bit about how you got started on your podcast tour, and if you have any suggestions for some of the writers and authors in the audience that are kind of hesitant to start their own podcast tour.
Yeah. Well, my very first podcast tour, I went on to market my very first book in 2017 before I even had a podcast. And the only reason that I felt like I could even do that was because a friend of mine who had a local radio show asked me if I wanted to come and talk about my book on her radio show. And I was like, well, yes. But, I didn't even know if I'd like my voice. I thought I'd be all like, you know what I mean? Like, you're so janky and you don't even know, like, is this going to work? And when I listened back to the show, I thought, oh, wow, like that, I don't hate that. Like, I actually handled that okay. And so what I did then is, so I went to Hope Writers, which is an online group. It's a Facebook group. I keep my friendless Facebook account because I'm still a Hope Writer, and I'm easy to just stay in community with a couple of those people. But what I did is I just went into that group and said, hey, I am trying to market this book. If anyone wants to, have me as a guest. And like 3 people who had really small podcasts said, you can be a guest on my podcast. And that's where I worked out like all of the, all the bugs. Like I didn't really know to like get a decent mic and to be in a quiet room. And, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I just, whatever, it was what it was. But it was still like, I was learning and I was growing. But when I actually decided, okay, with my 3rd book, I went on my like first official podcast tour. That one I took extremely seriously. And that one I did very intentionally. And that one was a huge success, which just kind of it was that story that I told you where it just, as far as book sales go, I don't know that it really sold my book, but it led me to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to go down the checklist again, growth for podcast tours. I mean, getting in front of other people's audiences is really the key to scalable growth. I mean, that's really what you need to do. And so, for example, you mentioned the 2 podcasts, the Thomas Umstattd and the Steph Gass show. Neither of those did I pitch. They actually came to me because they saw me doing something else. And so again, but it was because I kept pitching these smaller ones. And then eventually, and I would like post something. Well, I actually invited Stephanie to be on my show to talk about the social media tour. And at the end of that, she goes, will you come on my podcast and talk about this? And I was like, whoa, okay. Like that wasn't really, what my plan at all. And Thomas asked me because he saw me post a comment on his authormedia.social. And so both of those things happened just because I kept putting myself out there to ask. I just kept asking. But the key to growth when you're on a podcast tour is to have a good freebie. And so I created that 27 real ways for Thomas's podcast, because I thought I need something for writers. What can I do? And I
Yeah.
thought I just like quickly, I just thought I'm going to think of every single way that you can market your book off social media. And so I just
Yeah.
started typing. I formatted it, made this cute, thing.
Uh-huh.
Between those two podcasts and then being a Tuesday, I was invited to be a Tuesday teacher in Hope Writers, which has like 3,000 writers in it.
Yeah.
My email list has grown by 50% in the last 3
Yeah.
months, maybe 6 months, maybe. And
That's so awesome.
yeah. So huge growth. The key, good freebie. Nurturing, I think in an indirect way, when your followers start to see you appearing as an authority in other places, I think it lends credibility to them. I mean, they already love you, but it is a way to nurture them in an indirect way. Building community. I just have to say, this is not so much community building between the people who follow you. Writing can be so isolating. For years, I did it by myself. For years, I was just writing in the cracks between, nap times and carpool and, all the things that I was doing to raise my kids at home. And I would write when they were sleeping or write when run to a coffee shop while someone watched my kids or whatever. And I didn't know, other than like going to a couple conferences here and there was no way for me to connect. And once you leave social media, if you're choosing to do that, you basically cut that whole thing off.
Right.
And so podcast tours have just reignited like a new, like I have just met so many people. I mean, because like you and I, you can see people, you can follow up, you just get to know people in relationships. Like the relationship component is so important in this industry.
Yes.
And so the community aspect for podcast tours is one of the main reasons that I put forth the effort to do it. And then sales, of course, get yourself in front of someone else's audience and they're inviting you to be there. And, you can sell your stuff if you do it well,
Right.
So did you say tips too? Because I do have a couple.
Yeah, I did. I so appreciate you saying that, because that's what I have noticed with me being a guest and with my clients that I've worked with is we all, I think we think immediately if we're an author that this is a way to just sell a ton of books, being on a podcast tour and being a podcast guest. And it's unfortunately not. But when you get into it, then you realize like you just can't put a dollar amount on the priceless relationships you build and like building your email list and just all the things that come after that because you were a guest on a podcast. I mean, it's just priceless in my mind. So I'm so glad that you pointed that out. But yeah, I would love tips on, a couple of tips on our listeners that want to be guests. And then if you have anything to share, because I imagine, looking at your guest list, I'm guessing you probably have, it's more of like an invite only of people you have a relationship with. But I know when you have a successful podcast, you do get pitches. So if you have anything to share about any quick tips on even, if you're pitching a podcast, like from a host perspective, I'd love to hear your guest perspective and a host perspective.
Yes. Well, some of these are, and I just have 4, but some of these go both ways. So I would say, first of all, whether you are a guest or whether you are considering someone on your podcast, never cold pitch. Like I know that that's something that you stand for, but I just want to underscore that like, don't ever do it. Don't just go to a list, copy and paste and cold pitch some, random to all the mom podcasts. Just don't do that. Like you need to take the time to vet every single podcast that you pitch. Like listen to at least one full episode of their podcast so you can hear the tone, so you can understand like the vibe, so you can hear, is there a question that they ask every guest at the end? All of those things you want to know. And then when you go to pitch the person, use their name, reference the actual episode that you listen to. I mean, you might want to say something like, my name is Sandy, and I recently listened to your podcast for moms, and I love your episode on mom overwhelm. Well, I also serve overwhelmed moms, and I would love to come on your show and share how unmet expectations lead to overwhelm or whatever. When you do something like that personal, it makes you stand out, because most of the pitches, I get pitched every day. You probably get a lot of pitches too. 95% of the pitches that I get don't use my name.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll say, hey, Scoop on Balance, which is the name of my website. And so, it's that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, you have no idea who I serve. And you
Right.
have no idea. And for the first 2 years, I didn't even have guests on my show. And so
Yeah.
I would think, why are you pitching me? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
solo show. I don't even have guests.
Yeah. They just got your list. They have a list. Like you said, it's just a list they found somewhere of all the podcasts.
Yep. Terrible idea. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
never cold pitch. Second, have the heart of a servant when you go.
Yes.
Like, the posture should never be, how can I grow my platform? Like, that should never be your posture when you're going on someone else's show, but it should be, how can I serve this audience and this host who has so graciously allowed me time on her very hard fought, hard won audience? Like, how do I serve her? And when you do that, you will naturally grow your audience. Like, it will come through. It will come through that you're just not just on there like, hey, let me talk about me and all my stuff. You don't want to ever come across that way. Third, and this is more as I would say this, receiving pitches and mostly, but if you get a yes, okay, let's just say you get a yes, you pitch someone, you get a yes, be professional. Like, show up just like it's your job. So you be on time, you be prepared, you look nice. Some of these people want to record your video and they want to use it on YouTube, or they want to use it in, little clips on their social media, or however they choose to do it. Show up, like, take the time to purchase a microphone that sounds good. You can get like a whole setup for less than $100 on Amazon and sounds decent. Get a ring light so that people can see your face. If you're just starting out on podcast tours and you don't have these things, I would highly recommend that you go buy them before you start pitching yourself and practice. If you have podcasts that, like, as soon as you start gaining podcast guest appearances, you can start including those in your pitch. So you can say, if you want to get a feel for how I interview, here's a link to me on so-and-so's podcast. And it can be a teeny tiny podcast. It's okay. They just want to hear that you can do it. So yes, just be professional. Like, every single thing that you would do if this was an in-person speaking event or an in-person job interview, show up like that. Like, take it that seriously. And it will shine through, and people will invite you back because they're like, oh, wow, this was really different than the other people that I've interviewed. So, and fourth, and I've already said this, but it's so important, have a lead magnet or a freebie or something to give away. I went on so many podcasts and just pitched my book, and I just wish I would have pointed them to something, because it's a little bit bigger leap unless people really, really want your book. And I've bought like countless books because I heard someone on a podcast. So I know people do it all the time. It's a great way to sell your book. But if you have, like, hey, here's my quiz, or hey, here's my 27 real ways to grow and nurture your audience outside social media, that is such an easier maneuver for the listener than going and purchasing your $14.99 book on Amazon or whatever,
Yes.
So, yeah. And even if you are selling your book, like, just say, my book is Mom, You're Amazing, but I have a quiz for moms if you want to find out what your superpower is and you want to know how that reflects the heart of Jesus to your child, you can take my free quiz. And it's just fun. And, you can talk it up like that.
Yeah. And you're just automatically going to go take action on it, right? Because you might still buy the book at the same time too, but you're definitely going to sign up for your email list, which I love, because that's just a way, Sandy, that you can just keep in touch with everybody after the fact, right?
Exactly. And then a good quiz will point people to your book anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I love those. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Those are great 4 tips that, they definitely apply either way if you're hosting or guesting. So I so appreciate you sharing that. Well, I know we are out of time, but we could talk for hours, Sandy, but I definitely want to give you a few minutes just to tell everybody, of course, where they can get in touch with you. And then some of the things that you have that are coming up that are super exciting for writers that want to write off social.
Yeah. So, well, the best place to find me, like, overall, is the scooponbalance.com. That's my website. And there's links to everything that I do. The Balanced Momcast is my weekly podcast. That's the one for if you're an overwhelmed Christian mom, that's all that stuff. But then if you want to, there is a link to Writing Off Social. That's the new thing I'm doing with Mary Kay Tiller. And that is at writingoffsocial.com. And we are we have a podcast too. And there's only a couple episodes out, but oh my goodness, it's already, like, doing so great.
Yeah, they're amazing.
I'm so excited about, it's been so much fun podcasting with another human after doing it by myself for so long. So that's been a real blessing to me. But Writing Off Social is a podcast for female Christian writers who want to grow and nurture their audience without social media. And then we are getting ready to launch our first course.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I'll be sure and put all those links in the show notes. Well, this has been so good, Sandy. I knew it would be after hearing you on so many podcasts. I'm so glad we got to connect and just hear more about your new venture. And I can't wait to share it. And I can't wait for my listeners to hear this when it airs. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for everything you do to helping writers, market their books. It's fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Sandy. Oh, y'all, isn't Sandy the best? If any of what she shared resonated with you to begin to build your platform and market your book without social media, be sure to check out her brand new course, Writing Off Social. It launches soon at a great early bird price, and you can spend 8 weeks with both Sandy and Mary Kay Tiller, not only learning how to write and market off social, but getting live coaching from both of them to boot. You can get all the scoop at writingoffsocial.com. And if you found this episode helpful, I'd be so grateful if you left a review of the show. Piano Shelley says, Kim is joy-filled, focused on her listeners, and truly understands how to leverage and spread a message to a wider audience. I have gained so much from listening. Oh, y'all, that makes my heart so happy, and I hope you too are getting value from listening. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, I'll be there for you next week to help you market your book one podcast at a time. See you then.